1 in 5 children struggles with learning, processing, or attention issues. And not all of those children fit neatly into a box labeled ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, language disorder. Some kids struggle with attention, language processing, and sensorimotor areas, yet they don't have a formal diagnosis. My guest today is Carol Kauffman. She's a licensed speech and language pathologist for over 40 years, and she has identified those children in her practice and in the work that she's done and the research that she's done. And she's coined the term ALPS kids, kids with attention, language processing, and sensorimotor challenges. She talks about the unique profiles of these children and how to support them. Listen in to learn more.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Carol. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Karen. It's so good to see you and hear you.
Good to see you too. It's been so long.
And I've been following you and looking at your website, and I've had a chance to listen to a couple of podcasts, and they're just wonderful. And they're everything that was on my plate that I was trying to get across in my seminars. And it just, it's wonderful. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. And you were actually one of our initial content creators, because before the podcast, we were putting up articles that were designed to help parents and educators better understand these kids who thought differently, learned differently. And you contributed a number of articles on the site, which have gotten, a number of hits. I think your articles are the most read articles on the website.
Oh, really? That's great.
Like thousands of people have read your articles that are on the site.
Well, the reason is that I'm older than the hills, so I go back a long way.
You're knowledgeable.
I have a lot of stories. Yeah.
And, one of the things that you've talked about, and, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast, and there's a number of reasons, because I think we could probably have numerous podcast episodes based on your knowledge alone, but is this whole idea of this term that you coined, ALPS kids, ALPS. And for those people listening, you won't find ALPS in any official diagnostic manual, but I would love for you to describe ALPS children or an ALPS child for our listeners. Like, what do you mean by that?
Okay, well, they're all unique, and they're all totally diverse and different. But if you could bear with me, I will just do the backstory. And after I'm done, you'll have a very good idea of how I came up with this term. This was way back in the Neolithic period. As I said, I'm very old. It was in the 80s, and I was director of speech and hearing at a small rural hospital. And all of a sudden, one day, the OT, Michelle, came into my office, and she just throws something down on my desk. It was a piece of paper. And she said, "Look at this. What am I going to do with this?" Well, this happened to be a $10,000 grant to start up, of all things. This is back in the 80s. We were just a small rural hospital, a EEG biofeedback program for kids with ADHD. Turns out one of the women on the local county children's services board had a son. I think it was about 10 years old. And they had just returned from a summer down at the University of Tennessee under Dr. Joel Lubar, professor of neurophysiology, I believe it was down there, and the developer of this EEG biofeedback program to teach children how to actually change their brainwaves to be able to focus a little bit better. So according to this mom, her child came back a totally changed child for the better. And she was so excited about this that she persuaded the board to allocate the seed money so that we could start up a similar program at our little hospital. And the CEO gave the grant to Michelle, the OT, because she had actually been certified in biofeedback. It wasn't the EEG brain-based kind. It was more the EMG, body relaxation type, but at least she had the fundamentals. So she came to me because I guess I was the resident expert on ADHD at the time, not because of anything I was doing clinically, really, but because I was a mom. And we all know that moms, or certain moms that have children with challenges, will go to the ends of the earth to find out what makes their child tick. And I was one of those moms. And so she said, I know a little bit about biofeedback. You know more about ADHD. We really need to put our heads together on this. And I said, oh, great, I'm in. Then we decided probably be a good idea to go upstairs and find somebody in the mental health department to work with us as well. So we did that. Luckily got a fantastic mental health person to work with us. So after a couple of meetings, we came up with a diagnostic clinic that we christened the ABLE Clinic, and that stands for Attention, Behavior, Listening, Learning, Evaluation Clinic. And we like the multidisciplinary ring of that much more than something like the ADHD EEG biofeedback clinic, because we figured it wasn't a good idea just to go down the DSM, give a child a diagnosis of ADHD and then slap them on a machine and play around with their brainwaves without knowing what that child was all about. And this core team, OT, mental health, and speech and language, still is, in my humble opinion, just a dynamite collaborative team because of the very different but equally valuable perspectives each discipline offers. Not that we were it. I mean, we also got feedback from physicians, psychiatrists, teachers, parents, and others as we needed to. But this core team was just a great way to get that integrative ball rolling. And so we started our clinic. And as child after child after child came through the clinic, we were thinking, we'll ferret out which child has ADHD, which one might have sensory issues, which one might have speech and language. But no, it didn't work that way.
No.
What we found with the vast majority of children, they had a little bit, few issues in all of our areas. And if that child had just been referred to one of us, as what happened before, we wouldn't have necessarily picked up red flags and referred that child. And some of them had minor deficits, but added up, their so-called minor deficits actually caused major problems in their life, but they weren't qualified for school services because they didn't have that magic, 2 standard deviation or 1.5, but they still needed a lot of help. And so one day, I can't remember exactly when, I was driving home and thinking about these kids, attention, language processing, sensorimotor, ALPS, and ALPS. Oh, well, that's fitting because they certainly have a steep climb all the way through school and beyond that. So I love acronyms. So anyway, that stuck. And then we also started finding medical problems and other mental health issues. So I just ended up calling them my ALPS plus kids. I didn't want to say this child has ADHD, sensory processing, language. I just called them ALPS. So that's how it got started, and that's how it stuck. And we had this clinic for about 12 years. And when I left the clinic, whatever setting I went to from there, I just kind of took this ALPS, this multidisciplinary protocol with me, and it helped me so much more than before that happened. I was just kind of in my little speech and language bubble. And being a mother also, I realized these kids just don't come in these nice, neat little diagnostic packages for our convenience.
They don't, like you said, they don't fit into those little boxes. And we know from the research that there's so much overlap between attention and language and sensory processing, learning, mental health, and you can't tease them apart oftentimes because they impact each other.
No, you can't. And I've often thought maybe in the future, there won't be labels anymore. We'll be able to look at the whole child, the brain body, and say, well, this gut-brain connection needs to be, this way, and this is what's causing the child to do this, and this is how we can help the child. But we're not quite there yet.
We're not there yet.
No.
But you do describe, if you think about your coin term, ALPS kids, these are kids who struggle with attention, language, processing, sensorimotor errors, and often other areas as well. And when you look through the lens of a speech and language pathologist and your experience, what supports have you found to be helpful for kids with that profile to help them learn and reach their full potential? And I know, of course, they will differ depending on the child because every child is uniquely different.
Wow, I could talk for hours about that. Let me see if I can just smush it down. My seminars were 6 hours long, and the feedback I got the most was, this should be a 2-day seminar.
Oh my goodness. And we're trying to cram this into 30 minutes.
Yeah, we are. So I'm going to talk really fast but as they say in, what was it? The King and I, that old movie, if you're a teacher, by your students, you'll be taught. And I learned so much from these children and from my own child. But probably, let me break this down and just kind of tell stories about it. And I think you'll get a better handle on how I ended up dealing with these children. What we did in our ABLE clinic, we each did about a 2-hour evaluation. And then we put it all together in a collaborative report, had the parents come in. One thing I want to emphasize is that the parents are truly the wind beneath their children's wings. And you can't always get parents. A lot of times they have 6 children. You see single moms, you have grandma's in the hospital, but you do what you can. The other thing I want to emphasize is a mantra that I've used since then, the serenity mantra. You just do what you can, and you just accept that we just can't do this right now, but we'll do what we can. And sometimes even a tiny change makes big changes on down the road. So don't lose hope. There are a lot of things that you can do. So first of all, I made sure that we had a very good relationship with the parents. And the way we did this, I have another acronym. VIPs is what I call them, because the parents are truly the very important people in their children's lives. And so I want to make sure the parents know exactly. And we had an hour-long conference after our evaluations, and we were all in the room, and they would come in. And I'm sure you understand, you've seen it before. Sometimes they give you that look, like they're so wary, and I just dare you to tell me my child is dumb or whatever. And so after trial and error and beating our heads against the wall, we came up with quite a few different strategies that were almost miraculous in getting the parents really into the program and on our side and trusting us. And the first thing we did was validate them. And I remember, I believe Jesse talked about that at the end of the podcast, how it's so important to validate a child's thoughts and behaviors. It's just as important to validate a parent's needs and concerns. So we would say something like, wow, it looks like you've had a lot on your plate lately. Well, that often opened a floodgate. It's just, oh my gosh, somebody's actually listening to me. And they would go on and on and on, and we would listen and we would validate, because we'd let them vent, because truly they've got a lot to vent about. So, and it was just like getting that off their chest. They started to say, oh, well, they're listening rather than telling us what we're doing wrong. And then we would say something about their child. So we got to know your child a little bit, and wow, we love what he knows about snakes, and he's such an expert, and you'd see them soften a little bit more. And then what we did, we said, we're going to go over this report with you, and we're going to go over it word for word, tell you exactly what we did, how we did it, why we did it, what that means for Jamil, and give you some recommendations. We would use layman's language. A lot of parents would say, wow, he was evaluated before, but they just gave us a report and we read it and it's like gobbledygook. We just can't understand it. So we made sure they understand exactly what we did. And after that, we gave them recommendations. We provided them resources and references, and we were throwing all these out. We thought we were doing a great job. But then often the next day they would call and they would say, well, what do we do? And we would think, what do you mean? What do you do? I mean, we just gave you 1,000 resources and you don't know what to do. But then we realized, oh, they're totally overwhelmed. We gave them too much information. So then we started to tell them, okay, we have thrown out a lot of resources and suggestions. So now let's pin it down. Let's have you just tomorrow or sometime this week, go out and buy a big 3-ring notebook, divide it into sections, school information, other evaluations, resources and articles, a to-do list. Okay, so you've got that in sections. Now let's just put 3 things on your to-do list for next week. Number 1, call the school and set up an appointment to talk about what the school can do as far as accommodations there. And then number 2, check out that reading program on the computer that we talked about. Just check it out and see if that might be something you might want to use at home. And number 3, call your child's doctor about those sleep problems that Susie's been having. And that seemed to get them going, just get the ball rolling. And so we did that. We also encouraged them. We told them, you are definitely the wings beneath your child's, the wind beneath your child's wings. And you are much more powerful than you think you are. And so just start learning, and we are here to support you for as long as you need support. So that's how we did it. And interestingly, by the end of the session, parents would come in ready, you could cut the air with a knife sometimes when they first came in. At the end of the session, we were getting hugs, handshakes. Of course, this was way before COVID, and you could do all that stuff. And sometimes, hugs and, oh, thank you. We've never talked with anybody that had so much information. And so that's how we got the parents on our side, and we got them to be part of the village. Can't do it with all parents, but you do what you can. So that was a big thing, is getting those parents on board. And then some of the children stayed with us for therapy. Some of them just went back to school, whatever. But I started organizing. I tend not to be a very organized person, so I use a lot of graphic organizers for myself. And what I ended up doing was drawing a great big, on a 8x11 piece of paper, a triangle. Now it's all printed up. I have sheets of them. And I ended up calling it my ABC treatment triangle. The A stands for accommodations, adaptations. In other words, what can we do from the outside in? Like, you're not really changing the child, but you're changing the environment to make it easier for that child to function. So what can we do on that end? The next point on the triangle was B, stands for biological. What can we do from the inside out to help that child? And in my case, as a speech language pathologist, I couldn't, for instance, prescribe medication, but what I could do was be a very valuable knowledge and resource person. And I could talk to the parents and encourage a referral to the child's doctor for those types of medical problems that we see. There also, I got to know an incredible naturopath here in my area, and I would call her up if the parents were interested. She could work with the nutritional piece, supplements, that kind of thing. And then there are also train the brain technologies, such as EEG biofeedback that we used at our hospital and got some really good success with that. Sound therapies, interactive metronome. I became certified in that. It's a computer-based program that just kind of tunes up your body brain, and I saw some amazing results with that. But those kinds of things, biologically, you're actually changing that child's system from the inside out. And then the last one, the C, was cognitive behavioral, direct teaching and coaching. What can we do to teach that child skills that he or she can use to enhance learning or whatever issues that child was having? So then I became a collector. Some people collect stamps. Some people collect baseball cards. I mean, I collected strategies. And I was lucky enough to be able to travel the country. And again, I think I learned sometimes more from my participants because people would raise their hand and say, we're doing this at our school and we're really having good success. And I said, oh, what's that? And I'd write it down and then I'd learn more about it. And then I could pass it along to my next group, which might be, thousands of miles across the country. So I was trying to disseminate all this information. So that's what I did as far as treatment.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that you've described in that kind of that ABC approach is that it really is a multidisciplinary approach to the intervention, which fits if you've got children, adolescents who are struggling in a number of different areas, attention, language, processing, sensorimotor, then it's going to have more than one approach to treatment. But the other thing that you stated before, Carol, that I think is really important is that even with these various interventions, occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, or speech and language therapy, therapy for the attention, whether that's cognitive behavioral therapy or medication management, parental involvement is key. And you've described this as, a significant predictor of a child's success. And so it sounds like, again, this is really a multimodal approach. When you've got kids who have a number of issues that overlap, you've got this team of professionals and team of adults, which include educators who are helping that child to thrive, but the parents also have to be involved in that process.
Right. And a lot of it was persuading the parents, convincing them that they had a lot more power than they thought, and giving them the knowledge. I ended up collecting what I called my pluck file. I got information, and in this day and age, you can download anything. One of the things I did was I went to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. They have what they call facts for families. And whether the child, on ADHD, on sleep disorders, on obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, any mental health issue that you want, you can download information for parents. So one of the things that I did was try to help those parents become empowered, knowledgeable, and confident that they could advocate for their child. So the parent was always on my team. We talked, we laughed, we joked, we became good friends is what I wanted, without going overboard. But I got a lot of satisfaction out of that. And perhaps some of it came from the fact that I was a parent myself and I wasn't afraid to tell them, yeah, I know what it's like to be a parent because I'm on the other side of the fence too. And I know how hard this is.
Right.
So I think I got them to confide in me, but they definitely are a significant part of the team. So the other thing that I realized was there are three ways I could help that child, not just what I call primary therapy. In other words, the child would come in to see me. I would do my therapy plan for the day, and then the child would go home. That was primary therapy. I did it, but I also realized, and I called it secondary therapy, because I wasn't doing it myself, but I became a great and knowledgeable resource and referral person. Just an example, I was seeing a little boy with speech and language problems. He was also on medication for ADHD, ALPS child. And one session I know he was doing pretty well, but one time he came in and he was just up from his seat. He was running around. He wasn't paying attention. And I thought, oh, this isn't really like him. And I asked the parents, can you shed any light on this? He's acting a little differently. And the mom said, oh, that horrible ADHD medication, it makes him bite his fingernails until they're bleeding. And I said, oh my goodness, well, what's the doctor have to say about that? And she said, the doctor? Oh, well, we haven't mentioned it to the doctor.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
And at that point I said, well, might be a good idea to run this by him or her. I mean, it's kind of a very significant concern that you have. So to their credit, they did take the child to the doctor. The doctor changed medications, no biting fingernails this time. And I could see his speech and language, skills go right back up the ladder. So this is another example of how, you've got to work together. And that was a secondary intervention. And I was encouraging everybody that I talked with that you're more powerful than you think, because even if you can't prescribe the medication, you can teach the parents about it. You can talk with them about it. You can recommend another referral to the professional that can do something about it. So that was, I became a good secondary therapist, if you will. And the third thing I call tertiary therapy. Systems themselves have got to change. And I've worked in every setting, from home health to hospitals to clinics to schools to Head Starts. And I've seen where we can, oh boy, if we could just change the way they do this or this protocol or that protocol. One of the things, for example, the average classroom, the acoustics are terrible. They were terrible 30 years ago, and they're terrible today. And we need to get on a bandwagon. And it's not helping a particular child, but it's helping all children. So I was involved in a group that was pushing for improved acoustics in classrooms in general. So as I said, we, not only the parents, and I was somewhere in the South, I can't remember, Alabama, Mississippi, but one of my participants raised her hand. She said, I'm the parent of a child with autism, and the fluorescent lights were driving him crazy. And so we ended up in the governor's office. And now all the schools in that state have natural lighting in them. Somehow they got that done. And I mean, the sky's the limit to what parents can do if they are motivated and knowledgeable. So that's just one of the many examples. So it's, just starting to collect by doing research, by talking to other people, by going to seminars that are outside of your particular area and learning and talking. I would call people up, physicians, naturopaths, sound therapists, occupational therapists, and say, I'll buy you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Would you like to meet with me? I think I have children that might benefit from your services. And I was never turned down. I think I was turned down once by a physician, but
Well, I think that sharing information that you gather as a professional is really important, to not keep it to yourself, not keep it within the profession, not keep it within professionals, but to share it with parents and educators, people who are in the position to interact with kids and help them achieve their potential. And I think when you talked about parents being empowered, and I think when you share that knowledge with them, they are empowered by the knowledge because then they know why they're doing what they're doing, why the interventionists are doing what they're doing, why the teachers are doing what they're doing. And it helps them to be on board with the intervention and also to facilitate it. Because you've talked about, ALPS kids who struggle with language, for example, who also struggle with attention. Well, we know that language is the verbal scaffold that helps kids pay attention and make friends and understand and remember information and express their thoughts and regulate their behavior. These are all things that we know and you've written about for us for articles, but then that also helps parents understand why having conversations with their children help develop these other skills, because language does not develop in isolation. It interacts with attention. It interacts with self-regulation. If you can self-talk and talk to yourself, you can calm yourself down. So again, this is all things that we know as professionals, but we have an obligation to share that with other people. And I think you just do that so beautifully.
Well, right. And that's why I'm so glad you're here, because I think when we first met each other, I was on the verge of retiring and you're on the verge of starting something new. And I'm so glad that things are starting to happen. I think research shows it takes an average of 17 years for a new discovery to filter down into mainstream practice. Well, we can't wait that long. Our children just don't just not age, and we really need to get out the word as much as we possibly can. There are some new, some of them that they call new and out of the box actually have been around for 30, 40 years, such as EEG biofeedback. It's still, when you talk to the average person or therapist or professional, a lot of them will say, well, that's a fringe treatment. That's, now I read this a while ago, the American Academy of Pediatrics has classed it as I think it's how do they do that? Tier 1 type of intervention. So it's like, oh, finally, they're recognizing these things. But I have seen a lot of children improve. Nothing is an answer in and of itself, but added up are little answers that are provided by each discipline, added up and put into a comprehensive and organized program can really enhance a child's progress. So,
absolutely.
And I realize that this conversation has begged a few questions, and I would be very glad and very happy. As I said, I'm retired. I do spend a lot of time with my grandsons, which makes me so happy, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions that your listeners would have. I can even help them set up a program. I can send them all my sheets. I have a huge sheet for adaptations, everything that I've found. And then I looked into one of my handouts and I had written down about 20 more things that my participants had told me about. And so I can even copy those and send them whatever they want. I just want to say I'm here.
Thank you so much. And we're going to put your information definitely in the show notes so people can get in touch with you. And we're probably going to have you back on the podcast because there's so much more to talk about. You've retired from your work as a speech and language pathologist, but you continue to add value to allied professionals and parents of children who think differently, learn differently. And you're also working on a new science fiction novel, I hear.
Oh, you're working that in too. Great.
You are. And I love the fact that I think it fits with what we're discussing because the characters in your story are twins who are neurodiverse.
Exactly. And their skills, she has certain skills. Having her diagnosis, he has certain skills. And at the end, only by putting them together do they save the universe. So it's kind of a fun read. It's a sci-fi for, I don't know if it's young adults. I think it's for all ages. And I've done some field work. I've had people read the book and they really enjoy it. And we're on our 4th edit and we're about ready to do the layout now. So it's just fun.
Well, you have to let us know when it's out, because then we will let everyone know where they can get it.
Sure. Well, I'll send them a copy.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, just email me.
So Carol, if people want to reach out to you with questions, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Well, as I said, I'm retired, so I have no website, but just email me, CKAUFF, as in Frank, M1 at columbus.rr.com.
And we will put that in the show notes in case someone is driving or walking their dog and they can't write it down. We'll put it in the show notes so they can to get it when they log on to the website and pull this episode.
That's
Carol,
awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. You just have such great information to share, and I appreciate you sharing it with our listeners, with parents, with educators, with other allied professionals. It was great seeing you, and I'm thrilled that you are doing well. And thank you so much for all that you do.
Well, I'm thrilled that you have this. You're younger and more energetic, and I'm just so excited that you have that you're doing what you're doing and continue to spread the word. So we'll get those ALPS children up their mountain. We will.
We absolutely will.
Yes. Together, absolutely.
Carol has written a number of articles for the Child Nexus website, and 2 of those articles are about ALPS kids. And one of them is about how to support ALPS kids during a pandemic. Both of those articles are linked in the show notes, so be sure to check them out. If you have enjoyed this episode and other episodes that we have aired, please let us know. And one of the best ways you can let us know is by leaving a review. And what that does is it helps other people find our podcasts and gives us feedback about how we're doing. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.